The Hexenzirkel is an organization clouded in mystery and formed by a bunch of enigmatic women who gather for tea parties. Since there's so much lore about them that's scattered in all kinds of places, I thought it'd be fun to gather all the information I have and tell you about all the witches. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get into it. A. Alice. Alice is the most well known for being Clee's mom, but there are many aspects to her character. Most importantly, in Not Cry, we learned that she is the protector of the borders of Teyvat, a task that is very important for preventing more abyssal powers or other dangers from entering Teyvat. From Skirk's story quest, we also know that she welcomed Skirk into Teyvat when Sirtologi brought her from her own world. She also seems to have met Aloy, who is obviously from a completely different universe. Other interactions between Aloy and other people in Teyvat are not confirmed, which makes it interesting. Alice also seems to know things from the real world outside of the game, and sometimes breaks the fourth wall, like with the KFC collab or with her own introduction where she adjusted the camera. Since Alice is the elder of the Hexenzirkel and the one who established the organization, it makes sense that she is also involved in most activities relating to them. In fact, I think she's involved in all the big things that we know of, and even orchestrated some things of her own. Not only was she a part of organizing the summer events at the Golden Apple Archipelago, she's also one of the creators of Bottleland, and she's the goddess of creation in Sri Lanka. It seems like she has powerful magic that can create these kind of things. In the Homeward, He Who Caught the Wind event that's currently going on, Alice and Nicole use magic that takes someone's memories and lets others experience them, albeit with some edits. So that really shows the kind of magic that Alice possesses. Even though Clee is her only biological child, she seems quite motherly towards people without parents, like Albedo and Diluc. Alice is the one who helped Albedo get settled in Mondstadt after his master left him, and Clee and Albedo of course see each other as family. As for Diluc, you could read a letter that Alice wrote to him in the Hidden Strife event in 2.8 that says, "And since you helped my child out, I hope you won't mind if I treat you as if you were my own." But in Not Cry, she also said she has a lot of children to look after, and here she also included Durin, Varka, and Venti. Overall, Alice is a fun-loving, chaotic woman who also has a very serious job protecting Teyvat. And even though she has this job, she's no stranger to destruction either, a trait Clee probably got from her. In her book, Teyvat Travel Guide, we can read that Alice had many ideas for Mondstadt, like creating a machine that uses hilichurls to generate energy, or to flatten Starsnatch Cliff. She also literally writes that she did torture some hilichurls and blew some stuff up around Mondstadt, which caused the Knights of Favonius to keep an eye on her. And of course, she loves to fish blast together with her daughter. As I said earlier, Alice orchestrated a lot of the things the Hexenzirkel has done, and this includes the book The Little Witch and the Undying Fire. Considering 2 of the members of the Hexenzirkel are humans and have regular lifespans, they basically decided to write a book together to preserve their legacy, where every witch composed one of the chapters. But I'll go into more detail about this book later on in the video. B. Barbeloth. Barbeloth is a hydromancer who can read people's fate in the stars and can make accurate prophecies. She has a passion for hats, and that's probably the reason why the other members are all shown to wear one. Well, besides Jay. She's also Mona's teacher, and Mona often seems to complain about her, even dubbing her as an old hag. I can't really blame her though, because in Mona's Witch's Homework quest, Barbeloth sends her on a wild goose chase through some letters and eventually reveals it to be a prank in the last one. But she also gave Mona her vision and made her change her name to Mona Magistus. Although it's 3 times less than her own name, Barbeloth Trismegistus, it still shows that she sees Mona as a worthy student. Barbeloth overlooks the second part of the trial that's set up by the Hexenzirkel, whereas Alice oversees the first part. This trial involves fighting the Ascended King and Sublimated Queen, and Traveler completed it together with Albedo. Varka seems to also have attempted this trial to prove his battle prowess, after which Barbeloth wanted to reward him for finishing it. Varka then asked to look at her scryglass, which gave him his reasons for the expedition to not cry. Barbeloth states that the scryglass shows what the recipient needs to see, but as a hydromancer, she's usually the one to interpret the results. Similarly, she also did a tarot reading with Galambina, where she interpreted the cards that the moon goddess pulled. Barbeloth was also involved in the creation of Semilanka, where the people refer to her as the goddess of fate. J. Ioana Ivanovna. Ivanovna was the mayor of Snezhnograd, which is a position that Tsaritsa appointed her to. The Snezhnograd Vetshe is basically an administrative organization in Snezhnaya that seems to deal with politics on a smaller scale, specifically in the city of Snezhnograd, while the Tsaritsa is still the overall leader of the nation. The Tsaritsa established this governing body due to the fact that the Snowland Fae, who formed the aristocracy in Snezhnaya, did not support her and thus no longer took up any political positions. From what we can read in Ivanovna's chapter of The Little Witch and the Undying Fire, she was also loyal to the Tsaritsa. Ivanovna was also the only member who left the organization. This happened when she met the man she fell in love with, and they were eventually set to marry. Before she married, the other witches sent her a letter inviting her for a final tea party, after which she left the organization. An interesting fact about her is that her husband fell ill and she decided to end his life to ease his suffering, but it's not really clear if any consequences followed for this deed. You might also have noticed that I keep referring to her in the past tense, and that is because she, as she was immortal, also eventually passed away. Unfortunately, we don't know much about her life in between those events. What we do know is that she had some students who followed in her footsteps. The most recent one of these students is a person named Scarlet, who we met in the Windbloom's Breath event. M. Anya Marie Andersdotter. Andersdotter was an author who wrote many books in her lifetime, the Boar Princess being the most famous one. The characters from this story can also be seen when you play Imaginarium Theater and also on a painting in the Hidden Library. She valued her characters deeply and often wished they could decide their own destiny rather than being bound by whatever she wrote. This desire became strengthened when she found out about the dragon Durin that was created by her fellow witch Rhinedottir. This dragon was of course rejected by humanity due to its abyssal nature, and Andersdotter really wanted to write a different ending for him. However, Barbeloth warned her that the fate of this character would still be linked to the dragon Durin as they had the same name, and he would not be able to escape it. I won't go into too much detail, but if you want to know the whole story, check out my other video about Durin. In order for Semilanka Durin to be able to keep writing his own fate, Andersdotter left a magical pen for him. This made it so Durin could actually decide for himself what his life would be like, and Barbeloth also confirmed that his fate is no longer written in the stars. Since Andersdotter was also a human like Ivanovna, she eventually passed away from old age. This deeply struck the Hexenzirkel, especially Alice, who claims it made her understand the meaning of grief. The book The Little Witch and the Undying Fire that the witches wrote together seems to be dedicated to her as well, but Andersdotter never got to finish her own chapter before she passed away, and thus Alice decided to finish it in her stead. In this chapter, Alice seems to convey her own feelings and grief through the Little Witch character. N. Nicole Rain. Nicole is an angel who is one of the few survivors of her race. Most other angels were turned into the Seelies who guide us to treasure in the open world, but Nicole did not undergo this transformation and is able to retain her human-like form. However, a consequence of this is that Nicole is mute and can only speak through people's minds. She not only demonstrated this in Not Cry, but she also talked to the traveler in both Sumeru and Fontaine. The first time was after Wanderer erased himself from the Irminsul, and the other time was related to the Fontainian prophecy. What she does have in common with the Seelies is her tendency to guide and help people, and in the letter the group sent to Jay before she got married, the line, "A guide who will never get lost," is used to signify her. Since she's of the angel race, she has been alive for a very long time. For Nicole, this also means that she knows a lot about Tevat history, as she has seen a lot, especially when changes occurred in the world. Nicole has a tendency to want to share the information, afraid that she will forget. This leads to her basically dumping a lot of information on people and going on tangents. Similarly, she also overthinks a lot, especially about her stories. She even states that when she overthinks too much about a story that she wants to write, she loses interest in it and goes on to the next idea, ending up writing nothing at all. This is also exemplified in the meeting point quests with Nicole. Here, she comes up with an alter ego called Nicola Coco, who goes through all kinds of things. However, she keeps coming up with new things for the story, none of which drive the plot forward whatsoever. In the end, the story makes absolutely no sense anymore, and it looks like the main character is just back in the place where she started. In this quest, we also carve statues with her, which seems to be one of her hobbies. Alice also dubbed her the unappreciated master sculptor, so it's probably very important to her. Nicole views the act of writing as a tedious task, and thus does not do it often. When she does, her handwriting is really messy. This, what you might call laziness, also shows in Fischl's Witch's Homework quest. Here we discover that Nicole enlisted a Seelie friend of hers to indwell herself into authors that have a lot of inspiration while they sleep, and then making them write. This is how the books that Fischl has read and that she cosplays from came to be, credited to an author named Mr. Nine. These books also contained partial truths that took inspiration from a real thing but combined them with fictional elements. One of these was an explanation for how to create life, and Fischl used this to create Oz. Oh, Octavia. Octavia is probably the witch we know the least about, and we've only recently been properly introduced to her through Millie Astra Wonderland. She is what I can best describe as a world explorer. She appears to be able to travel to other worlds within the universe, or perhaps even other universes. It's not really clear what it is that's causing it, but Octavia also seems to be chased by destruction, which is the reason why she keeps going to other worlds. One of these worlds is Millie Astra Wonderland. This used to be a fictional world that people could travel to escape their physical form and the issues that were at play in the real world. From the Millie Astra trailer, it looks like the people who came to the world used something similar to VR glasses, which made reality and fantasy blur together, redefining it into something new. But the so-called dreamers eventually abandoned the world when the problems from the material world caught up to them, and so Octavia found it in ruins. One of the things she found in this world are the mannequins, which she took, and they became a part of the Hexenzirkel collection. Upon returning to Tevat and meeting up with the Hexenzirkel again, she got inspired by the adventures Traveler and Paimon had in the worlds created by the witches, like Bottleland and Simulanka. This made her realize that Millie Astra Wonderland needed a protagonist to revive it, and that's why the Wonderland Cosmosphere eventually ended up in Traveler's hands, and how we are now able to enter that world. Again, it seems like the destruction that's chasing Octavia has something to do with her being unable to stay in Millie Astra Wonderland for a longer time, and thus why she needs someone else to take up the task. R. Rhinedottir. Now for one of my personal favorites, and someone I've talked quite a lot about on my channel, Rhinedottir. She's an alchemist from Conria who is obsessed with creating life. She's the direct creator of a bunch of creatures like Durin, Albedo, Bakunawa, the Wolf Lords, the Rift Wolves, Elenos, and also the indirect creator of some other abyssal creatures and the Melazines. Her obsession with creating life also led to her fascination with abyssal powers, which is why she eventually tapped into them and became one of the 5 sinners. Although there's usually no internal strife within the Hexenzirkel, some of the witches have covertly criticized her decisions, like for instance Andersdotter feeling pity for the dragon Durin. Rhinedottir also recognizes that she's perhaps not the best mother. After the Cataclysm, Albedo and Rhinedottir explored together in domains in Dragonspine and other locations that are not confirmed. In one of these domains, she found an important artifact, the heart of the Shade of Life, Naberius. Rhinedottir disappeared after this, abandoning Albedo. It turns out that she devoured the heart, which caused her to merge with Naberius. Albedo said, and I quote, "She and Naberius are now one." It appears that the remaining Hexenzirkel members don't have much contact with her anymore after she became one of the 4 shades. And it's also not entirely clear what Rhinedottir can do now that she is one, and if she inherited all of Naberius' powers or not. All in all, Rhinedottir has definitely taken up a bunch of roles and titles in her life. another witch? So, if you kept track, you will have noticed I just told you about 7 witches. However, there's something that does not make sense to me about this, and that is this visual we were shown when Venti first told us about the Hexenzirkel. This circle shows 8 witches, and not 7, so does that mean that there are actually 8 witches and 1 is missing? I mean, it's really odd because there are many places where it's hinted towards there only being 7 witches, like in dialogue and the amount of chairs at the table on the Hexenzirkel Island in Mondstadt. But other times there are more chairs, like in this tarot card depicting the table, the background of the Imaginarium Theater gameplay screen, or the table in the Imaginarium Theater library itself. That last table has 8 chairs and one of them has a phonograph on it. Basically, I can't say with full certainty that there are only 7 witches, as some suspicious things point to there being 1 more. Instead, I'll share 2 things I found and kind of theorize about them, and you can decide for yourself what you believe. The first thing I want to talk about is this butterfly that you can see after finishing the Imaginarium Theater. In general, there are a lot of butterfly motifs in Imaginarium Theater, like the logo and the loading screen, but this specific one can be found in one other place, the Nighttime Whispers in the Echoing Woods artifact set. It's even mentioned in the descriptions that the ornaments loved by a certain witch were all adorned with butterflies. If we read the description of these artifacts, it talks about a young girl reading a storybook. The storybook follows a boy who fell in love with a girl and wants her to be happy forever. That's why when he meets a witch that grants wishes, he asks her to grant the girl all the happiness in the world, rather than wishing for her to like him back. Of course, he has to give something in exchange, but the witch does not tell him what it is. The girl ends up unhappy because she finds a life without challenge meaningless, and all the people around her were treating her kindly and forgiving her even if she did bad things. To her, this life was meaningless and boring, and she thus considers the wish a curse. But it's already too late, because at the end, we find out that the witch turned the girl into a storybook character. Now, although the butterfly can be compared to the bows on Nicole's outfit and might be linked to her, the description of the witch in the story does not exactly fit her. In fact, none of the witches of the Hexenzirkel are explicitly linked to granting wishes in exchange for something. This might suggest that the witch from the story is another witch that exists in Teyvat, considering some fairy tales within the world are actually capturing real history. No matter who the witch in the story is, the butterflies on the artifacts in the set look identical to the ones shown in Imaginarium Theater. There has to be some kind of connection between that artifact set and the Hexenzirkel. Another argument I have for this potentially being an 8th witch is the circlet piece. I mentioned earlier that every witch in the Hexenzirkel wears a hat, and this hat does not look at all like any of the ones they are shown to be wearing. That suggests that the hat is worn by someone else entirely. Then we have the book I've been hinting towards throughout this entire video, The Little Witch and the Undying Fire. As I mentioned before, this is a book written by the Hexenzirkel, where all 7 witches wrote one of the chapters. What's significant about this book is that it follows a young girl who wants to become a witch and has to go through a certain trial to become one. Her teacher, who is already a witch, tasks her to find the undying fire. The teacher's fellow witches wonder if that's a task that's impossible or too hard for the little witch to do, but the teacher insists. The little witch then goes on to meet a whole bunch of people. These people are all based on the witch who wrote the chapter. For instance, in chapter 2, she meets a prophet. This chapter is written by Barbeloth, so it's also based on her. Similarly, she meets a bioalchemist, someone who can travel through worlds, and a mayor, who are respectively based on Rhinedottir, Octavia, and Ivanovna. What I theorize here is that the 8th witch is unknown for now, or just someone who still needs to go through the process of becoming a witch. This book, then, would serve as a prophetic device that already tells the story of this witch, who's personified by the Little Witch character. It's maybe a bit of a vague theory, but it could mean that we will be introduced to a new witch in the future, or perhaps someone we already know will become a witch. I believe it makes sense with the context of the story world within the book, as it practically explains how to become a witch and what it means to be one. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but Alice did take over on the last chapter, the one that was supposed to be written by Andersdotter, who died before being able to write it. As I said, Alice conveys her own feelings through the Little Witch character and portrays Andersdotter as the Little Witch's teacher. However, if we were to imagine Alice as the Little Witch in the other chapters, it would make less sense, as Alice is the elder of the Hexenzirkel, which means she would not be meeting the other witches in the same manner that the Little Witch is meeting them in the book. That's why I would personally see chapter 7 as a diversion or an exception, where Alice took some creative liberty to express herself without being explicit about her emotions. So maybe a different person will take the mantle of the Little Witch in the future. So those were my theories for there potentially being an 8th witch. Let me know if you agree, or if you think that the 7 witches we know about are just the only ones there are. Or if you have any other theories about this, let me know in the comments as well, and I'd love to read them. Overall, I think the Hexenzirkel is a very interesting group of people, and I love how diverse it is. We have a protector of Tevat's borders, a hydromancer, a politician, an author, an angel, a world traveler, and an alchemist. And that's a lot of different types of people. And most of them are also from different regions as well. I'm really excited to learn even more about them now that Alice and Nicole are probably becoming playable, as I've been closely following their lore for years now. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you did. Thank you so much for watching. Bye bye!